Wolves need players, and they need players fast. In the January transfer window, Wolves have simply got to go out and get some real quality in this squad. But it's also important that they remain to look at homegrown targets, given the fact that they are very on the edge of their quota. Now, in this video, we're going to be speaking about 3 players that I believe Wolves should sign in the offensive side of things. We're going to be speaking about a few different positions over the next few days with regards to defenders, midfielders and forwards. And in this video, we will be speaking about forwards. Now, before we get into it, there are 67% of you who watch these videos who are not subscribed to the channel. I'd really appreciate it if you could. We are 40 subscribers away from the 3,000 target. If we could hit that before the end of November, we've got 5 days to do it. I would really appreciate it, and let's get straight into this one. The first one is a massively unpopular one, and I'm sure many people won't agree with it, but I like it for a few reasons. Now, I've gone for Dele Alli. He's 29 years old. He's very, very Premier League experienced. Of course, has had a very tough time with his mental health, with playing Premier League football in recent years, and it is a massive gamble. But if Wolves can go and get him, that would be incredible. Now, there's a lot of sticking points with this. Obviously, would Dele Alli come to Wolves? I'm not too sure. I think maybe he could. I think Rob Edwards could play a factor. I think, almost in a similar way where Barkley revived his career at Luton with regards to in England anyway. I do think that would be absolutely brilliant for Rob Edwards to try and get Dele Alli, and I don't think it will happen. I think it's very unlikely. I think the wages would be a massive factor. Obviously, he went to Como and only played 1 game there ultimately. And generally, I think the wages are going to be an issue. He will want relatively high wages, but it may be worth the punt, given the fact that Wolves are crying out for a number 10 that's creative, a player that can find spaces, can pick pockets, can ultimately make things happen on the ball. And I do think if he was to come in as a 10, if Wolves could perhaps switch to that 4-2-3-1 system that Rob Edwards so famously has played both at Luton and, of course, at Middlesbrough more recently, I do think it would give Wolves a lot of tactical flexibility. But as I say, it is a huge risk. Now, of course, he is a free. He is homegrown as well, of course. Obviously, came through at MK Dons, then was incredible at Spurs. And then obviously it sort of petered out from there with his mental health struggles and that sort of thing. But for me, it's a risk that I actually am erring on the side of Wolves taking. Now, of course, Dwight McNeil probably is a safer bet. He's one that's more rumoured to Wolves currently as well. He'll be cheaper wages. He's probably only going to come on a loan. And generally, he probably feels the safer bet, given the fact that he has got a lot of attributes that Wolves need. But if Dele Alli could pull this off, and if Wolves could pull Dele Alli off as a signing, that would be incredible. I think I like it in terms of a player that could come in and completely revive his career and turn it around. I really do think he could do that at Wolves. Obviously, he is 29, so you'd only get him for probably 2 or 3 years, really. But that's all Wolves need right now. They need a short-term fix and some real quality in this squad, especially in the offensive areas. So, yes, huge risk. Yes, very unlikely. But it's one that I'm willing to just put in there and just say, do you know what? Why not? From a footballing romanticism perspective, why not? From a real quality and exciting addition, to be honest, if he can get anywhere near to the level he was at Spurs, then Wolves will be absolutely flying with him in the team. And I think he would suit this team very, very well. So massive risk, very unlikely, but that's just an outside shout that I'm putting in the mix. Next up, I've gone for another really risky appointment, but again, Wolves need to throw the dice somewhere. They need to make things happen from somewhere. And for me, it's a big risk, and also, again, probably very unlikely given his ties to West Bromwich Albion. But Pereira, Wolves could do far worse than. Another player that, for me, has had some of the best performances I've ever witnessed live. I think, in terms of Premier League quality, we saw him do it in the Premier League, of course, with West Brom in the Premier League season where ultimately they went down, but he was absolutely sensational. Again, wages may become an issue. Of course, he's been paid fairly handsomely at Cruzeiro now. Obviously, he spent a spell at Al Hilal as well, when perhaps they were less glamorous than they currently are. But generally, massive risk, of course, and he's not the sort of the paciest player. He never has been. He's relatively quick with the ball at his feet and he's quick along the ground. I think in terms of a player that, again, he's coming to the end of his contract in the summer. Can Wolves get him early? Maybe. He probably cost them 4 or 5 million quid, maybe even more, because obviously had an exceptional season last season with Cruzeiro. But again, a player that I would absolutely love to see. And, I do worry when Wolves sign players from Brazil. I think João Gomes and André too, that you don't really worry about. But Jean Arias has shown that you cannot instantly adapt to the Premier League as quick as you think. And John Harris for me has been a massive disappointment. And Matheus Pereira I think is a lot of a safer bet because he has done it in the Premier League. Of course, you could argue it was in lockdown, so maybe there was that sort of tax with regards to, we've seen players perform in lockdown. For example, Patrick Bamford was absolutely unbelievable in lockdown. Obviously got an England call up as well from the back of that and generally looked incredible. But again, I think a lot of that was to do with Bielsa's coaching. So I think Matheus Pereira is a player that I'd love to see because I think he's one, again, that can create something out of nothing. Set pieces are something that I absolutely despise watching at Wolves, to be honest. I think the deliveries from set pieces are so poor that Matheus Pereira absolutely gives you that. In terms of that willingness to make things happen, to pick up those pockets between the centre-backs and the sixes or the centre-backs and any of the midfield players in general. He's absolutely got that in his locker. He can play off the right, he can play up front, he can play as a 10, he can play off the left as well. He did do that fairly consistently at West Bromwich Albion in the Championship as well. And generally, again, huge risk, hugely unlikely, and it may be hugely unpopular with many. But again, I don't think Wolves can afford to sit around and dilly-dally. Obviously, Pereira isn't homegrown, but I do think they will lose a few players in January, which we'll be doing a video about as well. I do think a few players will leave or should leave in January as well. So I think it's worth throwing the dice. And if Wolves are going to get relegated, they've got one of the best players in the Championship in their club already, because I don't think he would leave if they were relegated, given the fact that he knows the level, he can play at that level pretty comfortably. And I'm sure for him, he'll want one last big move. Perhaps, of course, Cruzeiro is a club very close to his heart, but I think he may want that one last big move. And I think if he could get to the Premier League again and then ultimately do well in the Championship, if they were to get relegated, I think it'd be a decent signing. I really do. And I think it's a massive risk and it probably wouldn't happen in terms of the likeliness, but I would love to see it happen, to be honest. Finally, I've gone for Harry Wilson, now a player that was massively linked to Wolves and ultimately Vitor Pereira actually turned down, which is quite frankly mental in my opinion. Obviously, getting towards the prime years of his career, really, 28 years old, now a player that can play in a multitude of positions, a player that, yes, although he isn't the quickest, and I do think Wolves need players, I think they could also look at bringing, Adama Traore back. I think you could do far worse than that, but again, the homegrown quota has got to be taken into account. I do think Harry Wilson and Adama Traore are both very good options, but for me, Harry Wilson I would be leaning more towards, given the fact that I don't think you should ever really go back to players that have left. I think Traore would do a lot in this squad with regards to just getting the ball down the line and getting the ball up the pitch and carrying it, because Wolves are ultimately very poor at that generally and have had no real threat from wide areas since Pedro Neto left, to be quite honest. And I do think they're crying out for that. But for me, Harry Wilson, again, for a few reasons. I think Wolves are going to need to be a threat from set pieces. They're going to need to improve on that. And Harry Wilson from set pieces, excellent. He can score from them, more importantly, directly from himself. And there's no one really in this side that I feel confident enough to do that. I think in terms of his delivery from set pieces, massively, massively underrated. I think he's got a key part to play in this squad. Premier League experience should not be understated, of course, as well. And also, if Wolves go down, he's excellent in the Championship. He'd comfortably be one of the best players in that division if he was to stay. If not, I think they could get a decent fee for him if they were to go down. And I think still some Premier League clubs would be looking to secure his services. I think in terms of a goal threat, he's got one of those things that I really like to see in a player in terms of he never shies away from taking a shot from distance, and a low percentage shot, a low XG shot, if you will. And I think, again, Wolves are missing that. There's no real desire to take a shot from distance. Jean Arias was meant to have that in his locker, and we've just frankly not seen it. I think Harry Wilson, of course, being homegrown makes a massive, massive difference, I think, when it comes to creating chances. Although he's not really done that this season, of course, because let's be honest, Fulham have been underperforming massively. I don't think he's been too much of a concern with regards to that either, to be honest. I don't think he's been anywhere near their worst player. And when you watch him for Wales as well, he is absolutely excellent. So generally, I like Harry Wilson. I think it'd be very, very cheap. I think if he wants the club that want him, and I think Rob Edwards could get the best out of him, he knows that Wolves have been trying to secure his signature for a while. I think they could do far worse than bringing Harry Wilson in. But I do want to make it very clear that I think Wolves need pace, but the actual pool of talent really in Premier League proven players at the moment with pace is really, really slim. Adama Traore being one of those that I've just mentioned. So generally, Harry Wilson's not the quickest in the world. He's a similar profile to Dwight McNeil, I suppose, just off the opposite side. But for me, I think he's got slightly more quality when it comes to striking the ball, when it comes to delivering balls from set pieces. And to be honest, I think it's more of you're more likely to get money back if he was to leave or want to leave as well than Dwight McNeil, to be quite honest. So generally, it's not an attractive signing, but I do think in terms of being able to play multiple positions, being Premier League experienced, being a goal threat, and more of a goal threat than the current wide men at Wolves. I don't think it's a bad decision at all, but Adama Traore is one that I do think everyone should be keeping their eye on as well. Other names mentioned in this video I get are very unrealistic or controversial, but for me, I would love to see Wolves show ambition and try and get some of those signatures of those players, because let's be honest, anything cannot be worse than the current forward options that they've got in those wide and number 10 areas. So ultimately, unlikely, yes. Ambitious, slightly for some of them, yes. But I would love to see it happen. Now, let me know your players in the comments as well. These are tried to be sort of homegrown focused and also generally focused on players that I think are worth taking a risk on, and Wolves need to throw the dice somewhere. I hope you did enjoy this video. As I say, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, as we're only 40 subscribers away from 3,000. I'm trying to hit that in the next 5 days. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.